Hello everyone, the blog leaks just dropped and I'm here as usual to tell you about them and basically break it down because things are getting very interesting before the PXG game. But before we begin, if you like these type of videos, make sure to like the video and subscribe to my channel since I do make blue lock content and leaks videos quite often. This chapter starts with both Kyorai, Jin, and Igaguri training together, where Kyorai is able to pretty easily get past Igaguri, but that's not the most interesting thing about this interaction. The most interesting thing is that Noah is actually watching both of them, which means that he's probably giving them tips or helping both of them get better in general, which could be interesting for the future of Igaguri, since for right now, he hasn't really done anything at all. Next up, we go to the Germany Shadow monitor room, where we see all of the blue lockers in the Germany team grouped up together to see their salaries. And I'd also like to mention that since Italy just had its final game, this is the final salaries for people like Baro and Ryu, as well as Aiku. And in response to hearing that Baro just got his final salary, Isagi says to himself that this is the final ranking that he must surpass, as he and Baro do consider each other intense rivals. Next up, the announcer says that there are currently 35 players in the bidding, but in order to be a U20 Japan representative, you need to be within the top 23. Then we finally get to see the rankings, where surprisingly in dead last is Nishioka. And if you don't remember who this is, I completely don't blame you, as he doesn't do anything whatsoever, but he is very hyped up and is even compared to Messi. And quite a few people have been theorizing that he would be a very good player, but as for right now, it seems like everything that we got on him was just simply overhyping him. But to go into the top 23, who are the current ones that are going to be able to represent Japan in the U20 games, we have Raichi, Hiyori, Zantetsu, Tokumitsu, Fukaku, Gagamaru, Krona, Reo, Karasu, Yukimiya, Sendo, Nico, Nagi, Otoya, Ryu, Kunigami, Chigiri, Aiku, and Bachira, ranking from lowest to highest from 23 up to the number 5 spot. And yes, you heard that right, Fukaku, the goalie for U20 Japan, has genuinely made it to the top 23 of Blue Lock and is only one placement below Gagamaru. We then get to see the reactions of Nagi and Reo, seeing that their placements actually dropped from last time, where Reo says we're still dropping and things definitely need to change. I'll get more into what this probably means later, but if you want to hear more about the Nagi and Reo dynamic that's currently going on, check out my last video about Nagi, as I give interesting points and ideas on what Nagi could be doing for the future. But after this, it's revealed that Shidou is number 4, with a bid of 100 million yen, and there actually is no number 3 spot, as Isagi and Baro are actually both tied for number 2 spot at 150 million yen each. But then we finally get to see the number 1 spot, who was unsurprisingly Rin, with 198 million yen. And before we get to fully see Isagi's reaction to this, we see that Noah walks into the monitor room and explains that the conditions are set, and whether you stand on the border, aim for a comeback, or go for number 1, the goal for the team is 1. Show your abilities calmly and rationally and win the game. And the Germany team begins to start their strategy meeting for the PXG game. But before we get to see that, we cut to the PXG team's locker room, where Loki tells everyone good job, seemingly after the game with the Ubers. He continues on to say PXG is a singularity as always, and he'll tell them the points to improve on. He says that Rin scoring 3 shots out of 4 is really good, but he needs to up the amount of shots he takes in a game. While with Shidou, it's kind of the opposite, where he shot 12 goals and only scored 3. And Loki tells him he needs to slow down on the shots and begin to practice on his accuracy. He says that Karasu needs to work on his duel winning rate, which could mean one of 2 things. The one that makes the most sense to me is that he's just simply telling Karasu to get a little bit better, as usual, because duel winning is basically his number 1 priority. Since when he was introduced, his whole thing was basically to break down his opponents and use their weaknesses to destroy them in a one-on-one battle. But of course, this could also mean that he's getting worse at 1v1 duels and possibly is underperforming in his games on PXG. Although I do see this as less likely, as Loki wouldn't be saying it this way if this were the case, but that is just my take on the scan. And as Loki is in the middle of talking, Charles begins walking out of the door, to which Loki kicks the ball in his direction and hits him in the face. Loki continues on to say he hasn't given Charles his homework yet, and Charles responds saying his meetings are always long and it's fine to be casual. Loki responds very interestingly, saying that he only joined the Neo Egoist League in order to nurture Charles, because he needs a passer to lead him to the top, and Charles has that talent. And surprisingly, Charles is even younger than Loki, being only 15. And Loki ends it by saying that he's here to study for the future of France and to become the best with Loki. But when we cut back to Charles, he's simply telling Tokumitsu to tell him when Loki stops rambling. But Loki continues on, saying that he still lacks overwhelming experience, and he came here to study. To which Charles nonchalantly responds saying, "You done?" And Loki says, "How long are you planning to be so careless?" And Charles says that he doesn't want to listen because he's a person person who likes doing the opposite of what he's told. This is when Loki stops talking to Charles and he begins talking to the entire team, saying, "Listen everyone, this team has been experiencing with two systems, Rin's system and Shidou's system, striving to pass to the two strikers with special personalities." He says that this was an experiment to bring out Charles' abilities and that the other members have just adapted to it, choosing a path to appeal their own existence. And in this way, their individual levels have also improved. But in this final match, they're facing Germany led by Noah, the team that's been undefeated just like the PXG team. And moreover, their formation is like Noah, coexisting and competing two systems, who are Kaiser and Isagi, which is an irregular and abnormal team. And in the case of PXG, they've been changing out Rin and Shidou's systems 2 times every 15 minutes. But he says that the abnormal formation is more interesting, so he wants to face the Germany team while using this abnormal and irregular form, with Rin and Shidou both on the team as their double aces at the same time. Shidou of course says that sounds great, as it's a 4-way monster battle, and Rin simply says, an all-out battle with no holding back. Loki then says that this is a max difficulty level mission, and please use the 2 beasts Rin and Shidou to win against the Germany team. This is the last homework from G to PX, finally ending this chapter. And in my opinion, this is one of the best setup chapters we've ever had in Blue Lock. This completely hypes me up for the PXG game, but now that I've fully gone over the chapter, I'm going to go over some of the things I found very interesting and give my thoughts for the future. Now the first and probably least interesting thing I wanted to go over in this chapter is Ikiguri. And I don't want to go too deep into it because I am planning to do an Ikiguri video in the future, but him and Kyorai training right now does seem to imply that he's going to do something important in the next match. And there also of course was hype of him going to do something after talking to Isagi, where Isagi compliments his ego and Ikiguri is very happy about it. Ikiguri himself is not completely out of the fight, but of course his skills are definitely lacking. But the fact is that Noah is interested enough in this battle that he goes to watch it. So it is very possible that Noah will point something out about Ikiguri, or that he's already found something he likes about him and will put him in the next match. Now the next person I wanted to talk about is Charles, who Loki thinks has potential to help him become the greatest striker. And I wanted to point him out because we all thought that Loki was insane, and not only being on the World 5 team, but also being a master in the Neo Egoist League. But someone even younger than him by 2 years is able to impress him enough to the point where he thinks that he is going to be the one to help him and be basically what Corona and Hiyori is to Isagi. And if you believe that Loki has metavision, which he probably does, it gets even more interesting because we know that people with metavision can't really coordinate with people without it, as Isagi was having a really difficult time coordinating with anyone on the field, including Corona, because he didn't have metavision, so he had to sub him out for Hiyori, who did have metavision. And this would make Charles tied for the second youngest person we've seen get metavision, tied with of course Nico. And this also brings me over to how good Loki's training is. Now before we saw Loki's training, we all had the same idea that he may just be too inexperienced to train people because he is only 17. But in my opinion, Loki has proved me wrong. He gives very concise and clear-cut answers to the problems that the Black players hold. And while it may seem very simple what he's saying, you have to remember that these players are in a place where they can train at high levels. So if he tells him to improve their sprinting, they're going to go sprint at a world-class training level, which will allow them to evolve at more than a standard rate. And to be honest, it seems like he appreciates on-the-field training over simply training in-house, because that is why he brought Charles here in the first place. So he knows, just like everyone else, that really experience is key. Unlike Noah, who very much focuses on the mental aspects of players like he did with Isagi, we sadly didn't get to see very much of that with Loki's training. But now I wanted to answer the question of whether or not Loki changing the dynamic of the PXG team in the final game is going to be a good thing for them or not. And I will say that I think it's just kind of weird that we didn't get any idea or implication that he was trying to simply train them together in the first place. As I feel like if you have 2 amazing strikers, one which very much excels in the penalty area and the other which can excel almost anywhere really, I feel as if you should play with both of those players each on the field at the same time. But the fact that he's going to allow them to play together on this high-end field for the first time that we've seen since the selection matches is very interesting, because they'll have to make split-second decisions while attempting not to step on each other's toes. Although I will say that we did get to see one instance of them playing together, but there wasn't really much of any coordination there. But to conclude on that point, I will say that this formation change that Loki has decided to do will either mean that PXG will become the strongest they've ever been, or they will not be full power while facing Germany. That is something we must decide as readers when the chapters come out. And to move on, we get to see that the name of the next chapter is called Originality. And immediately after hearing that, there's one person that comes to my mind, Seishiro Nagi. Since as we know, Nagi as of now is in an ego slump, and he doesn't have much of any originality. He is very bored with where he is right now and has no ego because he already came to his goal and completed it when he beat Isagi. But from what we learned from last chapter, the Manshine City team does have one more game to play, and this is the final game that Nagi and Ryo have to redeem themselves. So we could get a flash over to that match where we see that Nagi is trying to evolve himself. But there is one other person that this could be, and this was proposed by a translator named Hoshi on Twitter. They're usually the ones translating the Blue Lock leaks and giving out the translations and summaries for it. But they made a tweet saying, "I know many people have thought of Nagi, but I remember seeing this kanji at Hiyori's chapter." So this next chapter could be about how Hiyori contributes to the Germany team's playstyle. And this does make a lot of sense because last we saw of Hiyori, he wasn't quitting soccer, but he wasn't definitively on Isagi's side. So he pretty much has the freedom to go over and play with Kaiser as well as play with Isagi at the same time, or pick Kaiser over Isagi in specific scenarios. But that's all I have for today. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like the video and subscribe to my channel, and also check out some more of my previous videos. But yeah, goodbye.